basically, you gave a history lesson to folks for the John Locke Foundation of how cyber warfare has come to be seen, going back to the George W. Bush administration. And one of your key points was that things under Donald Trump are different than they were under both George W. Bush and President Obama. How so?
Well, the main difference is that with Presidents Bush and Obama, you had this top-level recognition of cyberspace as a place where governments were conducting espionage against us, stealing information, stealing secrets, stealing proprietary commercial information, and also a place that we needed to be prepared to do battle with other countries, steal their information, attack their networks, this kind of thing. This president really hasn't seemed to reckon with the strategic vulnerability that exists there, and this is most prominently expressed in his continued resistance to acknowledge that Russia interfered in the 2016 election. Obviously, he has a lot of sensitivity around the question of them intervening to somehow try to assist his efforts in the election, but he has also really not grappled, I think, with the way that that attack exposed so many vulnerabilities in the way that our electoral system could be probed, voting rolls could be infiltrated, and also how emails and other proprietary information could be stolen and weaponized against a political candidate, and how social media could be polluted with fake messages to try and influence people's decisions. These are all tactics that intelligence officials for many years have understood governments use and have used in other places. And President Trump really hasn't seemed to recognize that, and I think that keeps him from forming a strategic approach to how to think about defending cyberspace the way that his predecessors did.
Is this just President Trump, or does this extend to the people around him as well? Because he's not focusing on it, or because he is not acknowledging it, others are also setting it aside?
I think that there's certainly activity that is going on, and people in government are focusing on this. But when you don't have that top-level sort of North Star kind of guidance coming from the president, it doesn't give it urgency. And so the problem doesn't have the same level of urgency that I think that it did under President Obama, under President Bush.
What are the consequences if we don't do anything about it? If basically we say, this is not a priority, we're not going to focus on it?
Well, the consequences are that things keep getting worse. So China continues stealing intellectual property from American companies. Russia continues trying to meddle in our election. Iran continues trying to penetrate systems that control the power grid and other critical infrastructures. And again, it's not to say that there aren't places in the government that are aware of that and are trying to work to defend against it. But I think that what history has shown is that you have to have a strategic vision for this area because it's so new and because there needs to be real guidance and kind of doctrine from the top. I mean, think about it this way, too. There's no incentive right now for the Homeland Security Department to mount a big, aggressive effort to try and counter Russian propaganda ahead of the 2018 midterms. We have seen some statements coming out that are fairly high level, but there's not really a big incentive to try to re-attack the problem that happened in 2016 because that's so politically sensitive for the president. So in the absence of real guidance, we are maybe letting our guard down, I think.
Shane Harris is staff writer for the Washington Post. He's been focusing on these issues for a number of years. And Shane, some people who are supporters of the president are saying, look, this is all fake news. Mm-hmm. This is not an issue. This is all Democrats trying to get some political spin that will be to the detriment of Donald Trump. Why can we not approach the situation that way?
Well, I think first of all, it's not fake news, and every single intelligence official in the U.S. government who serves at the pleasure of Donald Trump is on record saying that the Russians did this in 2016, exactly as the previous administration said. Many of those officials who came to that assessment, some of them even carried over from the Obama administration. So this isn't a partisan position to say that Russia did this. What I would hope is that the political conversation could change to acknowledge that this was something that was done to the United States as opposed to Hillary Clinton or to Donald Trump or on behalf of. Those things did happen, but if we're going to get to a point where we can resolve this and talk about the real genuine nonpartisan national security threat this poses, I think to some degree it's going to require the president just acknowledging what everyone else, Republican and Democrat, says. Also, no one is out there saying, with very, very few exceptions, that but for the Russian intervention, Hillary Clinton would have won. No one's trying to make that case. So this isn't an effort to try to delegitimize the election of the president. I think it's more properly seen as an effort to get the government to wake up to a real national security threat that we clearly weren't prepared for.
We've been talking about Russia, but Russia isn't the only actor we need to worry about, is it?
Right. So China poses a major economic threat. For years, they've been stealing intellectual property and trade secrets from American companies and then giving those to Chinese businesses to accelerate their own economy. We did sign a deal with China in 2015 whereby they're supposed to stop that activity. There are mixed reviews on whether they have, but they still pose a tremendous espionage threat as well, trying to steal government secrets. Russia, we've talked about. Iran has been incredibly active in this space over the past 6 or so years. In fact, it wasn't that long ago where the supreme leader in Iran was talking notionally about the idea of developing what he called a cyber army. And today, Iran has one. It primarily uses it to attack Saudi Arabia and other interests in the region, but it has reached out and tried to attack critical infrastructure in the U.S. And then, of course, North Korea actually did launch an attack on an American company, wiping out tons of computers and data at Sony Pictures a few years ago. And while we're now in a conversation with North Korea about trying to denuclearize its weapons program, it is still building a cyber program that you could imagine kind of coming in and, if not exactly taking the place of a nuclear program, becoming another way that North Korea could menace the United States and its adversaries in the region.
One of the things that you mentioned in your speech to the John Locke Foundation is that this is somehow a fifth domain of warfare going along with the air, land, sea, and space, and the only one in which we don't already have some dominance.
Yeah.
Why is it important for us to sort of make that a key factor moving forward?
I think because Americans have become complacent to some degree with the strength of our military and the recognition that very few countries can really credibly challenge us. Some can't challenge us at all. And if we begin to think that we exercise that same level of dominance in cyberspace, we really underestimate the sophistication and the threat that our adversaries pose. The barrier to entry to being able to have a credible attack capability in cyberspace is incredibly low compared to the ability to field a standing army or build aircraft carriers and ships that can go around the world or planes that can fly by stealth. We can do all those things most countries can't. It doesn't take that much to get a sophisticated group of people together and form a cyber force that can steal your secrets, that can penetrate computers, that can control critical infrastructure. It's not trivial, but the barrier to entry is not even comparable to what it is in the traditional military domain. So if we don't reckon with that and recognize that we are not always going to be the strongest and the best in this area, then we are setting ourselves up to be taken by surprise.
Do you get the sense that there's anyone within the president's orbit or within the Republican Party who might be able to influence him, who knows this threat and might be able to get through to him?
I think there are advisors that he certainly has and has had that publicly in what they've talked about, they show that they get it. Some of those advisory positions have actually been eliminated in the administration. But I think that what this would probably take would be members of Congress stepping forward and in doing so in a bipartisan fashion and saying, listen, we're coming to you to emphasize this, not as a political matter, but as something that we have to solve as a country. But ultimately, I think what we've seen in this administration is that the president, he does listen to his advisors, but he takes his own counsel. He really does. I mean, at the end of the day, he is the one who he consults at the very end. Now, is it possible that somebody he really trusts could finally flip the switch and make him change direction? Possibly. But I think that just on a root level, he's so kind of skeptical to the notion of this foreign interference in his own election that it makes him, it puts blinders onto him, I think. I'm optimistic that somebody could break through, but ultimately that's going to be only if Donald Trump wants to hear it.